Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Vish Iyer, Vice President, Cisco APJC Architectures.
Hey guys. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I think for everyone in this room who's seated, I want to congratulate you to be seated in this room on a Thursday afternoon to listen to this session on powering the multi-cloud world. So, if you've been here for the last few days, I'm sure you really got a sense of what Cisco has to offer. And in this session, I really want to cover 2 or 3 important topics. I think one of the topics that I want to cover is what is Cisco's multi-cloud strategy? What's our role as an enabler for our customers in this multi-cloud space? And then I'll tag team with my colleague, Ronak Desai, who's going to share very specific automation use cases of how various technologies and capabilities that we have really come to life to solve our customers' complex business problems in this space. So if you look at Cisco's 5 strategic priorities, you would see that we are in the business of providing the secure and the intelligent platform for our customers. And in this area, we have 5 key priorities. And I think in this session, we're going to double-click on the role that we play in helping our customers expand into the cloud. So if in this session, we will double-click on that area. And if you look at the multi-cloud space, the reality is it's a really complex world. Every customer out there is expanding not to just one cloud, but to multiple clouds. And the cloud is, as Scott said earlier in this keynote today, is probably the most seminal technology of our decade. And one of the things that the cloud has done is it's forcing every enterprises out there to reinvent every IT domain. Cloud comes with a lot of capabilities. It helps organizations achieve agility. But when you really look at it, it affects every element of your network in the way users, things connect to your network, connect to the apps. And fundamentally, the number one challenge that organizations have is how do you segment users, how do you segment things to applications, and how can you have a common framework across the multiple domains, from your OT infrastructure to your IT infrastructure to your wide area network, to your data center, to your cloud providers, to your public cloud instance, or even to a SaaS service. How do you curate all of these experiences across a couple of different lenses? Now let's take a bank, for example. The number one challenge for the bank today, if you were to go to the IT manager maybe 5 years back and ask him what was his most important branch, he'd probably point you to a business district where he had a lot of high net worth customers or big businesses. But if you go to a branch today and ask him that same question, he would say his most important branch is probably at the heart of a metro station or at the airport, where his business is about providing the digital experience for his customer. So every enterprise out there, every CIO, every big IT head is really having to contend with connecting users and things on one side to applications and data on the other side. And all of his applications, whether they were front end, back end, are being virtualized, are being containerized. And therefore, he has to curate all of these experiences as each of these dimensions are actually expanding. So the real challenge for customers is, on 2 fronts. How does he evolve his existing on-premise environment, where he has to modernize his apps and make them into digital platforms? And the other side, really see if his newer generation apps can become cloud native. And if you look at this lens from the left to the right, where he is in the process of adopting clouds, he has to traverse a number of decision variables. The first one is most enterprises are already in two or more clouds. So one of the things that a CIO has to do is any person in his enterprise with a laptop and a credit card can go and subscribe to any SaaS service. And he's really trying to cost model all of those different instances in his own enterprise, from an orchestration perspective, from a visibility perspective. As his apps are being redesigned and being made cloud native, he realizes that he needs programmable infrastructure to fully realize the value of these apps. So he's looking at that second dimension, which is about how do I make my infrastructure, whether it is my connecting wired and wireless users, whether it's connecting my wide area network, whether it's automating my data centers. He's really looking at how do I curate all of these software-defined experiences to truly realize the value of this cloud-native app so that they can get visibility right from this programmable stack below. The next area is, today, most banks, when they are providing digital platforms, the expectation is, how do I manage application performance? What is the response time for a query? Right from where the user is coming in, all the way to the app. What is the response time for a query? What is the response time for a transaction? Can I get a monthly report, a weekly report, to tell me where the gap is? So it's about visibility of apps and their performance from a multi-domain context. And that, I think, is the #1 challenge today. And for that, you need to automate your infrastructure and modernize your infrastructure. The last area, which I think is a very, very critical area and is becoming more and more important, is in the area of compliance. It's in the area of data protection, data localization, data sovereignty. In the sense that if you look at requirements like GPDR, as customers make their apps cloud native, where the data is stored, on-prem, in the country, are becoming more and more important. So every enterprise out there is really trying to see, as data is no longer centered in that data center, what is the compliance framework that they need to look at from a security operations perspective to adhere to the local laws and regulations in the country in which they operate. So if you look at a cloud journey, these are some of the critical elements that we see that every enterprise has to contend with. On one side, they have to evolve their on-premises environment, and two, they have to do the fine balance of adopting public cloud. And if you look at various enterprises, they are in different parts of the journey. Some went all in and now are trying to come back, whilst others are taking a more measured approach of how they're going to curate their private as well as their public cloud instances in this network. And these are some of the critical pillars that we see all our customers thinking through. So now let's just pause and look at what's happening inside of those organizations as they are making this journey to the multi-cloud world. And this is around roles, personas, and applications. So let's take the first part, which is applications. The enterprises had a front-end application. They had a back-end application. They're all in the business now of building digital platforms that provide the next generation of digital experiences for their employees and as well as the consumers and customers. And in that area, you can categorize applications in 3 large buckets. They have legacy apps that may not connect to the cloud. They will have legacy apps which are becoming cloud tolerant so that they can interact with some versions of the cloud. If they've been in the journey of virtualization for the last few years, they probably have virtualized apps which are probably cloud ready. And for the new generation of apps which they are building, they are probably going the container approach and building cloud native apps. So if you look at your own organization and look at the folks who are in the developer community or in the application space, they would probably, all their applications would probably fall into these 3 categories. So for the persons in this room, how many of you are from the infrastructure side? How many of you are from the app developer side? Any raise of hands? I know it's a Thursday afternoon. Anyone? How many of you are from the infrastructure side? How many of you are from the app developer side? Hardly anyone? Okay. So for most of you in this room, I would say go and hug your folks on the application side, because I can tell you, more and more. We are talking about application-aware networking. We are talking about application-centric infrastructure. The app and the infrastructure domains will slowly, the blur will start coming down. And with software-defined strategies, you're going to enable more applications and on to the infrastructure side, and that blur will come down. And this is when it comes to the other personas which I'm talking about, is the DevOps role is primarily an application role. That freedom to choose the best platform and the tools. The IT ops is the one consistent environment that all of us in this room who are from the infrastructure side need to focus, is how do we eliminate the silos? The silos in wired and wireless access to the wide area network, to the data center, to the public cloud. And now, in this new cloud paradigm, there is a very, very important role that's coming up, which is in the area of security operations. In terms of how do you ensure that every inch of cybersecurity space that you have is secure? How do you model that, and how do you execute on that? From a visibility perspective, control perspective, while you don't want to slow down the innovation that your organization needs to go through. So if you look at multi-cloud, in this area, the three big questions that we really ask is, you have a lot of choice, but with like in everything in choice, you get a lot of complexity. And finally, for the business, you're really trying to see what's the most optimal way for you to do all of these things. So in each of these layers, when we look at applications and look at the dimension of public and private, you will see you can look at them from a couple of lenses. At the bottom end is the infrastructure platforms. We are talking about software and hardware-centric platforms that Cisco and a number of others play in the compute, network, and storage areas. And then you go a layer above that, which is around infrastructure services. You could consume them directly from the cloud providers like, say, Amazon or Microsoft or Google. Or you can build your own instances of virtualization by using things like vSphere or containers or OpenStack from Red Hat. At the layer above that is where you have a lot of complexity and have a lot of choice. You can either take it as a software as a service, as a SaaS service, or you can leverage all of the tools on the left-hand side here and build your own instance for your application. But if you look at this area of multi-cloud, it's just like at a personal context, few years back, we used to pay with cash. And today, most of our transaction is done through credit cards. And all of you will recognize and understand and probably agree that we are probably spending more for convenience and choice on a monthly basis. You subscribe to a video service, a newspaper service, a fitness service, a health service, because we like it. And we have more choice. We make our choices. It costs us a little more, but we pay for convenience. We pay for agility. We pay for the experience. And that's what cloud is. It's like you have the choice to choose what you want, to curate what you want, and get what you need. So what's Cisco's role in this multi-cloud solution framework? And let's talk about that from the lens of the personas that we spoke about. So if you're an app developer out there, the key deliverables that you're focused on is, how do I model my workloads? How do I deploy them? How do I manage them? How do I monitor them in terms of performance? And how do I map them? In this area, we have a couple of interesting tools and capabilities that we have. One is Cloud Center, which is our orchestration tool for multi-cloud. So just imagine you are in the infrastructure business. You have ACI deployed in your network. You probably have some compute servers, and you are on 2 public clouds. You bring in Cloud Center, and you can curate all of the experiences to know automatically what you're spending on the cloud, what are the virtual instances you can model them, and your users can deploy applications directly through this front end. So we provide you a mechanism to define those and provision them directly, and monitor capabilities like how much are you spending monthly? Do you need an extra large instance on Amazon or probably a large instance on Amazon? You can curate all of that using Cloud Center. On the other end of the spectrum, if you have a digital platform, we can put an AppD sensor, and it can tell you what is the query time for each user, what is the response time for the users, and if the response time is X or Y, why is that? Is it a problem on the network? Is it a problem on the application? What can you do to optimize the application for higher performance? And these are some of the things that we have primarily targeted at the developer community. Traditionally, at Cisco, we've always played in how you consume services in the cloud. Whether it's in your own private data center or on the public cloud, we have provided a host of solutions, whether it's in the compute space, in the network space, in the storage space, with either converged infrastructure or hyper-converged infrastructure. So here in this space, we provide our pools of solution. But one of the things that we are doing here, and Ronak will cover this in more detail, is you can have common policies now across your private cloud and your public cloud. And how you connect to the cloud are areas which we'll talk about very soon. We'll double-click on how the SD-WAN value proposition comes into the picture here. The last area of the stack, which is a very important area, is in the area of security, in terms of who accesses what, where, when, how. And it's in this area that we have a number of interesting tools, right from sensors that sit beside the application and monitor workflows, all the way to figuring out all of the flows that happen inside your cyber infrastructure and making all of that work together. So it's these sets of capabilities, all the ones in blue, that we have in Cisco to enable you in this multi-cloud journey. So whether you want to connect to the cloud, you want to consume services in the cloud, you want to protect yourself in the cloud, this is the toolkit of capabilities that we have. So now what I want to do in the next leg of this framework is to kind of talk about some of the use cases that we are seeing with our multi-cloud solution framework. So in this particular space, one of the things I want to talk about is the work that we are doing with different partners in this space. So this is an example of a real-life deployment in a customer, which we did with a partner. So in that scenario, the customer had ServiceNow. He had ACI deployed, and he had a whole lot of Cisco infrastructure in terms of our converged infrastructure, as well as whether it was with Pure, whether it was with NetApp. And he had 2 instances on the public cloud, one on Amazon and one on Azure. What we did here is we worked with a partner and integrated ServiceNow with our Cloud Center and its off-the-box integration with around 8 use cases. With this, what we did is the customer did not have to write new policies for integrating ServiceNow with the software-defined platform below. What would have otherwise, he would have, if you look at all of these third-party elements which he had already purchased, like ServiceNow for service management, he had AlgoSec for security management, and he had Infoblox for IP address management. What we've done here is we've helped him bridge this multi-cloud environment with his private cloud environment and provide a common front end through ServiceNow for all of the users. So if I am a developer and I say I want this workload with this set of capabilities for compute, network, storage, in a self-service fashion, we can provision that out of the box, right from ServiceNow, all the way to the infrastructure. So this is how this system works together and provides all of the deliverables that we spoke about from a DevOps perspective, IT ops perspective, and security ops perspective. So this is just a use case of how we are working with partners. This partner is right here in the world of solutions. You can go and check out this live demonstration of how all of these Cisco multi-cloud components work closely in the underlying stack for your customers. Moving on from here, what we wanted to clearly share with you is, in this space, one of the things that we are doing is we are trying to deliver these set of capabilities for you in terms of programmability, speed, flexibility, assurance, and experience. But one of the things we are doing is we're trying to provide you the same operational simplicity, whether you're on-prem, or whether you're in the cloud, or you're in combinations thereof. And all of the policies can actually work consistently across the multiple domains. And we offer end-to-end visibility. You get access to how these costs are being applied to your organization, whether you have an instance on the public, multiple instances on the public cloud, or on the private cloud. And one of the big areas where we're seeing customers really looking at this solution is actually in the area of compliance. Can I really figure out what's going on from a security operations perspective and take it to the next level? But with this area, one of the biggest value adds is we are reducing the time to develop and deploy apps and infrastructure. So that was to kind of walk you through what are the key capabilities that we are delivering from a multi-cloud perspective. I think in the next few minutes, I want to cover some few use cases to show where is this being applied and then pass the ball on to Ronak. So this is a very interesting use case. If you look at this slide, this is Cisco.com, e-commerce website. Cisco transacts all its business in a quarter through its partners. Every partner out there loads orders on Cisco. Through this e-commerce portal, we take the orders and we supply equipment to our partners and customers worldwide. This was a legacy application 2 to 3 years ago. We made it cloud native, and just to give you a data point, Cisco does close to $12.5 billion of business, products and services every quarter. From an e-commerce perspective, that makes us a little less than Amazon and a little more than Alibaba every quarter. So this is a very complex e-commerce system that's purely cloud native, that's taking all of this business. And what we did here, which is interesting, is we've completely transformed this application and made it cloud native. And we are now adding the renewals piece of our business through this portal. And this was done in close to two years. And one of the things that we did, and this is what we call as the Platform 3, is we leveraged all of these solution components that I spoke about earlier in the deployment of this Platform 3. So this multi-cloud management platform is based on Cloud Center. It's multi-tenanted. And we have cloud-native apps. And we have deployed this entire stack with ACI on this infrastructure. But we have added a few more elements to ACI, and I'll cover that in the subsequent slides around how we've integrated the SD-WAN domain and the SDA domain so that users can go directly and access this app, and you will get a consistent performance in this tool. If you are immaterial of whether you're a partner loading an order from your office or branch in your own office or in a business launch in an airport. The key deliverables of this Platform 3 is every query will get a response in 70 milliseconds. Every web page response is 700 milliseconds. And it's consistent across whether you're coming through your own network or coming through the internet. So this is how we re-engineered our own internal commerce tool to make them cloud native and leveraged all of these different elements of our multi-cloud stack to run this from an end-to-end perspective. So taking that same dimension forward, we wanted to take a different dimension of SD-WAN. I know Anand in the previous session spoke about SD-WAN, but our use case for SD-WAN was, obviously Cisco operates with over 100 countries, and we connect to hundreds of extranet partners who connect directly either through the internet or MPLS links to our capabilities. One of the key requirements we had is how do we segment users and get them access to the appropriate application on the wide area side. And one of the top use cases for us inside Cisco is obviously Office 365. But one of the things we were seeing is in every branch, that we had a primary link and a secondary link. And the links, when the secondary link was not being used, though it was available. And one of the things we wanted to do with our SD-WAN solution was to see if we could move from active standby to active-active and have really this application-aware routing so that we can prioritize, say, this is an Office 365 traffic type. So can it be routed locally? Like, for example, in Europe, we have to ensure that Office 365 adheres to the GPDR standard in that part of the world. So this was the primary use case. We connected the users securely based on the traffic type to that appropriate bundle. And this is our worldwide deployment of our own technology, which was the Viptela-based SD-WAN solution that's being deployed across Cisco now. And we have started deploying this in tens of sites and will replicate this in hundreds of sites. But the key takeaway for all of us in this room is the business benefits that we leveraged using SD-WAN. We obviously were able to load share our links. I think the biggest deliverables was we improved performance and we reduced cost from a wide area perspective. So this was some of the key benefits of software-defined WAN in the context of our multi-cloud journey. And this is what every customer out there is looking at leveraging SD-WAN to optimize his WAN cost, but more importantly, improve his experience for his end users as they access apps in their infrastructure. The last use case that I wanted to talk about is security. I know this is a very, very complicated site, and Cisco has a number of tools in the software in the security space. But this is essentially a framework. What we've done here inside Cisco is we have a layered security model. And in this layered security model, we have various tools which do multi-factor authentication so that we can ensure that every authenticated user uses only the app that he is authorized to. So this is a framework where we decide who accesses what, where, when, how inside our infrastructure. And we used all of these capabilities and solutions that we have in our space to make this work for us every single day. And this, as everyone says, is security is foundational, it's universal, and this is how we have implemented this in our own stack. And with this, I think the metric of success in security is if you're not in the news, you're probably doing something right. So this is our multi-factor authentication-based layered security model that's in operation, that covers endpoints, that covers the network, and that covers all our cloud capabilities, and including app defense. So this is the end-to-end cybersecurity strategy that we have implemented internally. And we are using this as a reference template for customers. And you can go and check more details of this in the IT hub of the World of Solutions. So those use cases, we wanted to kind of talk about how we in Cisco are consuming our multi-cloud solution components. In the next slide, I want to quickly talk about, there has been a lot of innovations. We've heard a lot of them from the last few days. And we continue to innovate in this multi-cloud space, whether it's in terms of connecting to the cloud, protecting in the cloud, or consuming services in the cloud. And if you look at this continuum, we have a number of new solutions that we have launched in 2019. I spoke about the Cloud Center suite. Earlier today, we had KD talk about our HyperFlex Anywhere strategy. And a little later from now, we'll have Ronak come and talk to you about ACI. But what we wanted to kind of bring home the point is we have a number of solutions and capabilities to help you in this multi-cloud journey. Please leverage us as the enabler. And what I want to do now is to pass the ball on to my colleague, Ronak Desai, who will talk to you about the automation use cases that you can leverage, or what we have seen being leveraged as best practices across the world. And let me pass the ball on to Ronak. Please welcome on stage. and take us home. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, good afternoon. So I was going to kind of do a little bit double click. How many of you were there in the today morning's keynote? I did a demo of ACI Anywhere. Hopefully you got the message. I'm going to do double click on that and see what we are doing with respect to multi-cloud, multi-domain, and how the whole automation plays into that. So I've been on this journey for some time now, specifically in data center for the last 17 years. I've built a bunch of products at Cisco. The last one which I've been working on is ACI, Application-Centric Infrastructure. I was the first engineer on it. It's been 7 years. So we pioneered the concept of intent-based networking. And I just wanted to kind of capture from perspective of what was our vision, where we are leading with it, and how we are expanding that to across multiple domains. So when we defined intent-based networking, right, our whole goal was to capture the intent of the network from a policy perspective and requirements of the applications for it, right? So what is the requirement from an application perspective to deploy it on a network infrastructure, capture that, and then automate it to a way that it can be deployed on every device in the network, be it your hypervisor networking or be it the services which are associated to your networks, right? So that is what we call it, defining the policies, and of course, use that policies, take it into our controllers, and then deploy it across the whole network. The other important piece is, yes, you define the policy, you push the policy out to the network. How do you make sure that actually it's working and doing the job which you intended to do, right? So that's where we look at it to see, we collect a lot of this information coming out of this intelligence switching infrastructure which we have built it. We look at of course, our hardware tables as well as the software switching tables, and ensure that the context in which you define your intent is enforced. So that's what I call it, looking at the context and do right decisions for you. The other part is, the big thing about it is the telemetry which we are collecting from all of the switches. The biggest problem for us as a network infrastructure owner is when the app guy calls it saying that, hey, my app is either running slow or there's some problem. It's mostly a network problem. That's how it starts. And that's when it's mostly a reactive process, right? We hear that 70% of the operations people's time is spent on troubleshooting and trying to triage the issues. So what can we do to make it that simple? And that's where the analytics piece comes into the picture. We're collecting a lot of this information out of the devices, correlating the events which it's generating it, and kind of helping you triage it or get it to a closure for the resolution standpoint, right? So we've done a lot of work in this area, and of course, a lot of products have been already announced. And the last but not the least piece is doing the assurance, right? And how do we make sure that, again, from a troubleshooting standpoint, narrowing down where the problem areas are, giving you the insight in terms of what is happening from a capacity standpoint. Can you become predictive, saying that, okay, if you continue to add application on your infrastructure at this rate, you'll run out of the capacity in 3 months. So start planning it, right? Start calling your sales team to buy or enable more capabilities. So this is what I call it, the intent-based lifecycle, right? It's basically starting from defining the policy to activating it, get the context from the network to make sure it's doing what it's intended to do, take that context, feed it into your analytics tool to give you the visibility. So we started on the data center for this intent-based networking back in 2013. Then, of course, we have taken this concept now and then extended it to our software-defined access, which is our campus solutions. We're taking that to the SD-WAN. And then, of course, the next big thing which we are working on is the multi-cloud, which is what we talked about it this morning. So to get into before we get into really the multi-cloud, ACI, we've been shipping it now for around 5 years. And so there are some interesting use cases which we have seen customer use this. And I thought I would kind of take you through that journey and tell you some of the interesting automation use cases which we have found it. So talking about Reliance Jio, this is a service provider, mobile operator in India, has deployed ACI, one of the fastest growing mobile operator. I think if I remember correctly, they went from 0 subscriber to 100 million in a span of 6 months, right? So they had to do a massive innovation in terms of not only from a network infrastructure, but also from a retail and how do you kind of onboard those many customers. So their use case was they were deploying, for using the traditional gear, they were taking 3 weeks to deploy a data center. And when I talk about data centers, I'm talking about regional data centers in a city or in a group of states. And when they were taking 3 weeks, and when I talk about deploying it, it's basically deploying not only the network, but also all the applications which are, or the servers which are connected to the network, and getting into the production where it's ready to take the workload. With the ACI and what they have done it from an automation standpoint, now they're able to do 3 data centers in a week, right? Initially, they used to take 3 weeks for 1 data center. Now they do 3 data centers in a week. They were deployed upward of 35 data centers. This number is 33, but they've done a lot more than that. Massive number of leaf switches. And this is what they enable them to get to that kind of growth rate from a perspective of their subscriber base. The other use case, and this is quite interesting, and I think if you hear this morning Scott talk about this virus called NotFi, which was basically destroying a lot of the enterprises, and he talked about chocolate company and the pharmaceutical losing billions of dollars in a span of 4 minutes. So security is actually extremely critical for the banking, and with what is happening with respect to all the attacks, I think we spoke about that as well. So that's where our Tetration, which is our analytics tool and the visibility tool, comes into the picture. That sort of helps you not only discover the policy, so you can do your whitelist policy so that you don't have a lateral movement if at all some host got infected. So it allows you to derive that policies, and we enforce that policy in the infrastructure from an ACI standpoint, whether it's on the hardware switches, or it's on the firewall, or even in the host sensor, right? So we allow you to kind of enforce that. And this is what the bank in Indonesia has done it. So this was actually a very good use case for our intent base. The other use case which we talk about is the semiconductor SK Hynix in Korea. And these guys, they were trying to optimize their day 2 operations. And that's where our network assurance engine was quite useful for them. Again, I think this was what they were trying to optimize was that 70% of the time, their operations people were spending on troubleshooting and triaging issues. So with NAE, they were able to, again, cut down their troubleshooting time. And we have other customers who have done a massive improvements where they have seen 70 to 80% improvement in terms of efficiency, right? We have a lot more other use cases. One of the use cases which is extremely interesting is there is this service provider, actually for banking or financial applications. They were trying to migrate their data centers from a legacy infrastructure to the ACI infrastructure. So they had pre-planned, they had integrated that whole automation way of deploying the configuration in their CI/CD pipeline. They validated it into their test networks. They planned the whole transitions, and they planned for a certain number of hours. And it was, I think, not just hours, it was probably days. They finished the whole migration 6 hours ahead of their best case estimates and almost 30 hours ahead of their worst case estimate. And the way they were able to do this is because they had automated it, they had deployed the full, all the policies in the network, and when they started migrating applications, they had to make no changes, literally, or wherever they had to make the changes, they were able to do very quickly because of the benefit of the automation. So I think if you look at it, what you guys are managing it right now, your domains are expanding it, right? Without the automation and without what you do it from a visibility standpoint, it's going to be extremely hard to manage, right? You're asked to do more with less. And automation is going to be a key. So with that in the background, let me just kind of walk you through when we talk about multi-cloud and how does this whole automation and the consistency of policy deployment helps you. So when we started in the data center space here, and we basically helped you define your intent with respect to not only the network physical infrastructure, but also with respect to virtual infrastructure and layer 4, layer 7 services. So we started with that, and now we are saying your applications, you want the flexibility, or your developers want the flexibility to deploy these applications either on the cloud, because it takes a little bit time to bring up some new infrastructure on-prem. So you want to kind of start off, develop the application in the cloud, and then bring it down. So if you are trying to do that, I think consistency of your policies becomes extremely critical. a consistent way of defining your network connectivity across multiple clouds and your on-prem data center becomes very, very important. And that's where the whole ACI Anywhere and our multi-cloud piece comes into the picture. So I showcased this morning about AWS and Azure and how you can get your network connectivity. And the case which I was talking about is, when you're trying to do something like this traditionally, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of commands. And of course, you could have a fat fingering. And then how do you troubleshoot those issues? The benefit of the automation, and I talked about it, saying that traditional way, if you had to just set up a connectivity between 2 regions of AWS, 2 regions of Azure, and your on-premise data centers, it would almost take you 3,300 commands on your CSR routers. And then if you made a mistake in one of those, in setting up your IPsec tunnels or your BGP VPN sessions, troubleshooting that is going to take a lot of time. So when we automated this, we were able to do this with a couple of clicks. So it made it extremely simple to define your network connectivity policy across the multiple clouds and your on-prem data centers. Again, that's where automation comes in. This is the place where we took on the burden to automate it for you, but we are providing you tools on top of our infrastructure where you can sort of bring in the different part of the ecosystems, be it the things which are connected to your data center network gear, or be it other tools like ServiceNows or any virtualization orchestrations. So we are started with AWS. We're announcing, today we announced Azure, and then of course we will enable it other clouds as well. But now, the interesting point what is happening is, traditionally your DMZ, which is where you put your firewalls for traffic coming from outside of the data centers and accessing your application, that's where you're filtering it, right? Traditionally, it's like next to the data centers, right? Now, what we have seen it is, because of the domain or where people are accessing from a user standpoint is either mobile or they are international, people are looking at colo-based DMZs, where they're putting those firewalls and the filtering mechanism in the co-locations. So now you could have your campus user coming in and accessing either applications which are deployed in the cloud, or the hybrid applications, or applications which are deployed in the data centers. So you're sort of centralizing that function for the better efficiency, better latency perspective, and then providing the access either from a campus to the data center on-prem or the campus to the cloud. But we have also seen cases where people are doing completely virtualized DMZ. They're putting DMZ in the cloud and then doing all the filtering and all the firewall functions. And we, of course, support all of this model with respect to automation and then allow you to choose and pick what you want to do it. And so that's what we talk about it here when we talk about the connectivity from either data center to the campus. And SD-WAN, of course, plays a very critical role here. So automation is sort of important, but if you didn't have the visibility for that, I think it's going to be, again, a big problem. Again, this goes back to a large domain and how you manage it. So to kind of walk you through what we are doing it from a multi-domain perspective, right? With SDA, I think one of the challenge we as Cisco have always had it is, we have a great solutions for a domain, but what a lot of our customers are saying, I buy your campus solution as well as your data center solution as well as your SD-WAN solutions. What can we do to kind of bring all this together? And that's where we have been focused a lot of energy and from a lot of engineering resource perspective, where the classic use case is, if you define your policies in the data center for either within the applications or how users access the applications, can you define it at one place and consistently enforce it either within the data center, be it on-prem data centers, or be it in the cloud, when users are accessing from your campus or are accessing from a mobile device, right? Can you make sure that that is consistently defined? The classic use case which I tell about it is, a user in a branch, a bank teller in a branch, is not allowed to access the mortgage applications. If he's trying to access, how do you make sure that policy is enforced correctly, but you also get the visibility? And that's where we've done a lot of work where we brought in the SDA domain, which is our campus solution, with the data center solutions. And now you're able to define policy at one place to exactly do that function. And so now, with the data center, what is happening is your applications are going to not only in the on-prem, which was what was in four walls of the data centers, but now they're going in the cloud. With 5G, what is happening is it's actually going into the micro data centers, which are closer to the tower for a better experience for the connected car or whatever the applications you have it for 5G. So sort of applications are moving outside the data centers. And so we absolutely have to make sure that when we are connecting all of this, from a WAN perspective, we are doing the right path selections so that SLAs, which applications are providing it to the users, are met, right? And we are able to now influence based on the application requirement and based on what is the performance of your SD-WAN, we are able to influence the path selections, and we are automating that fully, right? Our goal is to hide a lot of those complexity so that you don't have to think about it, which you have to do it today, right? And that's where all of those integration makes a lot of sense. Again, I think automation is a key piece, but visibility becomes very, very important. With AppD, what we have done is AppDynamics is the tool which we have it, which basically does a transaction-level performance evaluation and gives you the visibility. We've done the integration of the AppD now with our data center solutions. So you can actually detect if the application is having a problem or having a performance issues. The app owner or application operation person can actually cross-launch and take out the snapshot of the problem from a network standpoint, do it troubleshooting from a traceroute perspective or collect the stats perspective, and kind of give that data ready so that when network owner comes in and he wants to troubleshoot or triage it, he has all that information, right? So there is a lot of integration happening from a multi-domain perspective where we are bringing in not only different domains, but also a lot of the visibility tools, right? One thought which I'll leave you with it is your domains are getting larger and larger. Your applications are going at places which we had never thought about it. So our job and our passion is to make sure that we simplify it, and we simplify it to the extent not only from an automation standpoint, but also from a visibility standpoint, so that it's easier and we can all go home on time at home. That's all I had it for today, but if you have any questions, I'll be here, and you feel free to come up and ask me. Thank you very much.